Hi there, I'm Renee Hobbs, and welcome to 534, EDC 534, Digital Authorship. Today's date it's March, my goodness, what day is it? It's March 7th, and I'm here in the Dallas airport on my way to Sao Paulo. So Matt, when I heard you talk about Paulo Freire and literacy is expanding, I realized, oh yeah, he kind of anticipated my trip. So it turns out that the time for me getting on the airplane comes way too close to the time of our class. So we won't be having our live synchronous class tonight. I apologize for that. But instead, I'm going to run through some of my observations about looking at your work this week and get you ready for, well, first for taking a spring break, and secondly for coming back to rejoin us on Wednesday, March 21st, when we'll have our live synchronous class again. Okay, so let me share my screen with you. Let's see. Looks like you might be able to see that now. So this week's topic, of course, was creative collaboration. And you really did get to consider the power of vlogging and screencasting as a form of expression and communication that has potentially lots of interesting applications into the classroom. We are really thinking about why are collaborations so powerful when it comes to creating media and presenting our digital identities. And I really, really enjoyed looking at your vlog entries on Flipgrid. And I'm just going to talk through a couple of key ideas that came out here. It was such a pleasure to watch and comment on these. So, of course, Tim, you started us off quite beautifully with a very well-constructed Flipgrid with jump cuts and with multiple camera angles. You really helped us appreciate the different ways in which people think about online identity. And your strong introduction and conclusion illustrated the power of working within the conventions of the genre, right? We appreciated how polished and yet authentic that performance that really was. So I guess here you were down at the bottom, right? Starting us off right there. Amazing work. So Denise, you were next, and you actually really touched a really important nerve around the way in which having a public identity online raises our anxieties. And it makes us more like tourists and minglers and less like, central actors. You also told a really poignant story of the principal who basically told you guys that you couldn't share school business on social media. And Jamie, your response to Denise was really beautiful around the power of being vulnerable, and that dimension of authenticity there is really rooted in our being honest with our feelings and our experiences and the limitations of our knowledge. So Jamie, you came next, and of course, a lot of people loved your great comment. I'm not a vlogger, I'm a learner, right? You go, girl. That was beautiful. And we appreciated how you quoted from the text that you read, how you talked a lot about your own journey of learning hashtags and learning about digital etiquette, and wondering how to nurture online relationships so they weren't merely promotional or self-promotional. And you ended this week with more questions than answers. And I especially appreciated your feeling obliged to exemplify the identity of the school librarian. And there was a lot of beauty and integrity in that part of your talk. So it was great to hear. Angie, you talked a lot about the Walk My Worlders, and absolutely did the most creative approach to illustrate visually the three types of digital identity. How did you do it? Up close is the ones who are their authentic selves, and far back are the ones who are uh, trying to be partially have identities, and then way, on the edge of the screen, um, those who really wish they weren't having to participate in online social media. It made me laugh. And then when you turned that into your more personal conversation about your identities, your blurring of identities as a yoga teacher, and now as a digital literacy expert, a lot of reflection on, well, what are the consequences of a fractured or blurred identity? And you opened up the question, how do we share our identities, or do we share our identities with our students? So that was really great. Cornelia, you were really the first person who pluralized the term identities, or at least that's when I noticed it. And you really framed digital identity and learning in relation to the culture of standardized testing that reduces time for learning. And there was a moment there when your own natural performance, it was a little slip. And you could see how Barbara and Pat, who responded to you, just loved you more and felt grateful that how you recovered from that little moment. And it was a beautiful moment. And Pat comments about how when we encounter that, then that all helps us all reduce our anxiety, right? About being our authentic selves online. Alita, really interesting. The use of the drawings, uh, the pictures to illustrate, kindling, stifling, our urge for perfection, and our fear or our embrace of chaos. I think the fact that you positioned these different dimensions of digital identity in relation to thinking about the power of collaborating as a communicator in a responsive relationship with an authentic audience, it was beautiful. And your Twitter story also moved me quite a lot as you reflected on how there are real risks associated with the use of social media. Um, Pat, you talked about the anxiety that you had in uh, doing this particular activity, and framed your reflections on this idea about how teachers need to develop a comfort. Some key ideas in the readings are teachers need to develop a comfort with this. But you pointed out that teachers are sometimes criticized when they express their opinions, and that there are dimensions of risk here. And you were the first person who brought up this idea of the collective voice, as you described how you and your principal both share a Twitter account, and that this idea of having a collaborative or a institutional voice is part of the learning curve. And Adam responded really in an interesting way to that, about the very idea of speaking as an entity is also another aspect of identity in the digital context that's kind of important. Now, Adam, you did a piece of true performance art, I think, and I was really so completely blown away by it. It's a series of questions with dramatic pauses, followed by a beautiful rant on the relationship between performance and identity and branding and popularity and freedom, human freedom. I found myself thinking about your post for several hours after I watched it. I think really something I hope you get to write and think more about. Barbara, you really brought the topic of ethos into the conversation, and the idea of playful self-expression. So I and now and there's still some of you who contributed a little bit later in the day that I haven't had a chance to watch your Flipgrids. I'm going to be looking forward to seeing them. But I was just delighted by the quality of the work that you did on this activity. It was just a delight, and you could see it as I was reflecting on the readings in relation to your comments and ideas. I made my own list of ideas that shape my thinking about new dimensions of authorship in a digital age. So really enjoyed the work that you did for this past week. Okay, so let's just take a few minutes and review the homework for when you get back from a spring break. Spring break is March 12th through 16th, so take advantage of it and enjoy your week off. And maybe you're going to get ahead, or maybe you're going to take the week off. It's okay, whichever you choose. But let's take a look at what I'm hoping you're going to do for when we return to our regular live synchronous class on Wednesday, March 21st at 7 p.m. Our theme for the next class, one of my favorite topics of the whole semester, and you're so ready for this. You're thinking about it already, I'm sure. The ethics of representation. What kind of power is inherent in the practice of representation? So a couple of things to do. One is, since we're starting like the second half of the course now, I do want you to be thinking about your course final paper project. You remember this part of the course is a pretty substantial assignment. You've got the leaps, of course, and we're going to talk about the one coming up, the digital storytelling. You've got the class participation that you're doing every week. And then this final paper project that's worth 400 points. You have a lot of freedom here to develop something, and it might be a research paper, it might be a curriculum, or it might be a creative project, and it could be something else, right? In any case, you will be creating a pachakacha. That's a short 5-minute or 5 or 6 minute presentation about your work. But you are going to lay out what you want to do. And you don't have to decide right away, but this is the basic sequence of work here. And the first deliverable is coming up on March 21st, when I'd like you to email me some ideas for a possible project that would fit within the scope of this assignment, would be meaningful for you as an adult learner, and that might, in fact, help you meet the goals of this course in acquiring your expertise in digital literacy. So, so an email on March 21st will kick us off. Now, we're going to talk more about the Leap 3 digital storytelling project. And all I'd like you to do right now is really read that assignment. Here it is. You're going to be creating, it could be a podcast, it could be a video production, it could be a screencast. You're going to read a little bit about the theory and practice of digital storytelling, and you're going to examine the content of some stories to get started. I've suggested a really terrific article by Joe Lambert, The Digital Storytelling Cookbook, a couple sample pieces from The Moth or the Story Center. Basically, you are going to create a digital story of your own design. And you have a lot of freedom with this assignment, but I do want you to pay attention to the criteria for evaluation. I want you to compose a digital story that shows an audience and helps them understand who you are. A story that enables you, the storyteller, to learn from the story that you tell by finding a deeper meaning to that story. And I want you to be able to use language, and if it's a video, an image as well, to offer a narrative that activates the emotion of an audience and uses a dramatic arc that includes a particular moment that illustrates an insight and prompts the audience to reflect on their own experiences and look for larger truths. That's the essential elements of the genre of digital storytelling. Of course, you'll post it to your blog and tweet a link. It's due Wednesday, April 4th. So you'll have about 2 weeks after you get back from spring break to work on that. And that should be about right. Okay, so these are the first stage is really getting ready for the second half of the whole course. Now let's talk about what I'd like you to do for our meeting on the 21st. We're reading a great chapter by Patricia Lang called Representational Ideology. She did her dissertation by interviewing kids who were producing YouTube videos. Is that not cool or what? And reading the whole book is beyond the scope of our work, but this one chapter is quite insightful about what she learns about how kids reflect on the ethical dimensions of creating YouTube videos. So we'll read that. And then I'd like you to choose one of the following, either Jess Parker's Critical Literacy and the Ethical Responsibilities of Student Media Production, or Jean Burgess's Hearing Ordinary Voices, Cultural Studies, Vernacular Creativity, and Digital Storytelling. So everybody should read the Lang, and then you can choose one or the other of these two pieces. But here's the fun part. What I'd like you to do is create an infographic or a data visualization that examines a couple of key ideas from those readings that resonate with you. Now, you might benefit by learning more about the infographic genre, and reading chapter 10 would give you a good understanding of how infographics work to communicate meaning. And of course, some digital tools and examples are here, right? So I'm going to show you 3 of my favorite low-cost tools for making infographics and data visualization. There's Pictochart, Infogram, and Easily. And of course, in the book, I've provided a bunch of examples, but just recently I had a chance to make an infographic, right? And so I made an infographic about the grandparents of media literacy, using a template and creating a vertical sequence of ideas that try to get at some of the ideas in my project looking at the grandparents of media literacy, right? So you can see that I've got several panels as I develop the arc of that argument, and I develop that argument using a combination of image, language, sound, and design, right? So you can see an example of an undergraduate infographic, right? Here's one of my undergraduate students who developed this infographic as part of writing an academic paper about the comparing the past and present of various kinds of beauty propaganda, right? So it should fuel your imagination for how to think about capturing some insights from the reading in that creative form. As always, if you have questions, let's use the Facebook closed group to discuss those ideas. And if you found yourself all the way at the end of this video and you actually got all the way to the end, how about if you go below where it says leave a reply and tell me one wonderful thing that you hope is going to happen during your spring break week. Okay, well, that's all for now. Thanks for listening. I'll see you guys March 21st. Have a great spring break. Bye now.